It wasn't too long ago that much of the world was caught up in the royal wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. You don't need to be British to at least find some sort of interest in that. In fact, even though we're a democracy, there were viewing parties that sprang up in bars and restaurants everywhere. My library where I work even had an elaborate viewing party at the ungodly hour of 6 a.m. with scones and tea and all sorts of British flags and paraphernalia. People came to our library decked out in all sorts of elaborate hats. I was told that they are called fascinators. Anyone going to a royal wedding needs to have a hat. For that brief time, even though we are a democracy, it seemed like we all wanted a little bit of fantasy to say that we were part of that beautiful royal wedding. With all of the political divisiveness that we have had in our nation, we might welcome the idea of being part of a monarchy. And whoever is king or queen is, and that's that. When I went to Russia for an exchange program in high school, we had to make sure that everyone in our group knew the status of their citizenship. That was the first time I ever heard that you could actually be a dual citizen, being a member of one country while at the same time being a member of another. Knowing if you were a dual citizen was especially important because at that time, if anyone was a dual Russian and American citizen, they needed to formally renounce their Russian citizenship so that there was no chance that they could be held back in Russia when it was time to fly back to the United States. And so we see Jesus today. The scene is right before Jesus' crucifixion, and Pilate is questioning him. Pilate asks him if he is the king of the Jews. And Jesus puts the question right back onto Pilate. Because that question of who Jesus is to you, is he just another philosopher? Is he just another great teacher? Or is he your king? That question is the most fundamental question in human life. Who is Jesus to you? And when Pilate distances himself from Jesus, he says, I'm not a Jew. I mean, your own people handed you over to me. What have you done? Right there, we find ourselves in the very core of this universe, at the center of all existence, the focal point of what it is to live out our human existence. And Jesus tells him and us who he is and what he is on earth for. Jesus does not give us any room to say that he is simply a great teacher. Jesus will not let us demote him, whether we like it or not. My kingdom is not of this world, says Jesus. And there it is. Jesus is nothing other than a king. A king whose kingdom is not an earthly kingdom, because if you study your history, you'll see that earthly kingdoms, whether they're good or they're bad, all share one thing. They all have a lifespan. Like everything else on earth, earthly kingdoms die. Jesus is a king, and his kingdom is not earthly. And since it's not earthly, the nature of it is different. It doesn't die. It exists one level above the created order. And being one level above the created order, no matter where you are from, to be human is to be subject to him. Jesus is telling us that there is a whole other frame of reference to this life. And we often forget that. On Thanksgiving Eve, just this past Wednesday, we spoke in this sanctuary about worry. And when we worry, it is as if we turn our focus entirely in on ourselves, thinking that all there is to life is just us, or what we can see around us. And we take our eyes off of the frame of reference that Jesus is telling us is there. his kingdom, his kingship, his love for humans, his own creation. So very miraculously, we are, all of us, people who are dual citizens. We have a home in two places. Most people only think of that way when they face death. I want to challenge you to think this way. Think kingdom-minded, that you belong here in heaven. Think that way while you're still very much alive, right in the here and right in the now. Because when you start thinking in terms of that, right now, in your present circumstances, that you have a home in two places, you start to share your focus. You can begin to look at life challenges and your life path in general from the perspective that you don't live through it alone. You live in communion with a monarch, a divine monarch, who is not a fake, who makes that claim falsely. All the while, you live your American existence, your human existence. You are part of a divine monarchy that does not die. In fact, death is subject to Jesus. That's what Easter Sunday is all about. Nothing at all is outside of the kingship of Jesus. So, what does that look like for you? What will your life look like? What can it look like? Knowing that you are also part of a divine monarchy all the while that you live in the here and the now. What does hope look like for you now? Knowing that you are very much a dual citizen. And that one of those kingdoms is going to outlast the other by an eternity. The hope and the love of Jesus can visit itself in the now. In fact, that is precisely what Jesus is explaining to Pilate. And if it doesn't inform our life in the now, it will certainly inform our life when our life transitions from this home to our eternal kingdom. Being a citizen of two kingdoms can present a bit of a conflict for us. Sometimes it's hard. We are blessed to be baptized into Jesus' death and resurrection. We are baptized into that eternal kingdom. And yet, you know what? We still struggle in this life. Being a part of Jesus' eternal kingdom does not exempt us from struggle here. What that means is that it is very possible to experience hardship. And that, you can still struggle through pain, through mourning. Yes, you can struggle with loss and sadness and still very much be a victorious child of God, even still. It is okay to carry both sadness and hope at the same time in life. In fact, Jesus is modeling that very perspective for you and I while he talks to Pilate. Jesus is king over life and death, king over all creation, and yet he's taking in our humanness, carrying our burdens in life right to the cross. That's why he came here. And even though he's the Lord of it all, he's standing in front of Pilate, getting ready to be handed over to a death sentence by hypocrites, power-hungry rulers of both religious and political sorts. So Jesus is carrying and experiencing sadness and grief all the while at the same time. He is Lord over all of these things and victorious over death and time itself. All of this he is doing because while he is a king, his character toward us is very much humble and full of compassion and love. The whole point of Jesus coming to live through life was to carry our brokenness and sin away to the cross so that we would never be alienated from God. So that we could still be part of that eternal kingdom of which he spoke all the while we walk through the rough and the tumble of the here and now. Amen.